and my gut tells me he wasn't the primary actor in this. I see him as the lookout, the person waiting for the others to emerge. Because with a barrier like that, a heavy security gate over the front door, you aren't getting past it. There's simply no way you're breaching that kind of security gate. For 44 days, one single question has plagued both investigators and the public regarding the vanishing of Nancy Guthrie. How did the masked figure on her front porch actually get into the house? Doorbell video captures him at her doorstep in the pre-dawn hours of February 1st, 2026. His head is bowed, his hands are gloved, a backpack is on, and a firearm is holstered on his right hip. We've reviewed that video clip hundreds of times, dissecting his every move. We've analyzed each second he lingered on that porch, desperately trying to figure out how he slipped into an 84-year-old woman's residence in the dead of night without rousing her. How did he do it without alerting anyone nearby, without leaving the telltale signs of a forced entry that are always left behind? We've gone back and forth on whether he could have picked the lock or perhaps had a key. We considered an unlocked window, or the possibility that Nancy, profoundly deaf without her hearing aids, simply never heard him force his way in. But it turns out we've been focusing on the wrong puzzle, because there is a feature of Nancy Guthrie's front door that completely alters our entire understanding of that night. It's a detail that was hidden in plain sight in the footage, apparent in every photo of her house, noted in the public property records, and known to anyone living in similar southwestern homes. But it's a detail that, until now, no one outside the official inquiry had zeroed in on. Nancy Guthrie had a formidable security gate installed over her front door. This wasn't just a video doorbell, not just a standard wooden door with a deadbolt. It was a solid metal security gate, wrought iron mesh inside a steel frame, the type that, once secured, is virtually impossible to breach without specialized power equipment. Breaching it would create sustained, loud noise and leave behind unmistakable damage that police would have noted the second they set foot on the property. Furthermore, a neighbor residing 4 houses down from Nancy, who has an identical gate on her own home, confirms it. She says there's no plausible way the individual seen on that porch was attempting a break-in through the front entrance, for one simple reason: it couldn't be done. Not within a 41-minute window. Not without equipment that is nowhere to be seen in the video, and certainly not without waking the entire street. This can only mean the gate was opened by someone already inside. This is the pivotal breakthrough in the Nancy Guthrie investigation, and it fundamentally changes the entire narrative. Before we proceed, let's be absolutely clear on what is being examined here and what is not. This report outlines a hypothesis put forward by a neighbor who possesses intimate knowledge of the security measures typical for homes in the Catalina Foothills. Her theory is bolstered by publicly accessible evidence and professional analysis from former FBI agents who've studied the case. This is not a formal accusation directed at any single individual. No charges have been filed. No arrests have been made. The Guthrie family has been officially and unequivocally cleared of any involvement. What this analysis does is pose a question that the physical facts compel us to ask. If that security gate made a forced entry through the front door a near impossibility, then how did the intruder gain access? And the conclusion that seasoned detectives, security professionals, and local residents who know these systems keep reaching is identical. Somebody had to have let him in. Now, let's break down why. Nancy Guthrie, aged 84, vanished from her home in the Catalina Foothills area of Tucson, Arizona, during the very early morning of February 1st, 2026. She had been a resident of Tucson for over 5 decades. She raised her 3 children there alone after her husband, Charles, passed away in 1988, at just 49 years old, during a mining expedition in Mexico. She was a fixture at the same church every single Sunday. She was on good terms with her neighbors. She handled all her own financial matters. By her own choice, she lived by herself in a residence estimated to be worth around $1 million, located on a quiet road where properties are set well back, separated by the natural desert terrain. It was a landscape of saguaro cacti, offering the kind of seclusion that affluent retirees in the region cherish. Her mobility was severely restricted. She was incapable of walking 50 yards without assistance. She depended on daily medication for a persistent heart condition, one dose in the morning and another at night, both absolutely essential for her survival. A pacemaker was implanted in her chest, which was connected through Bluetooth to an iPhone application that gave a real-time feed of her cardiac rhythm. During her waking hours, she wore high-powered hearing aids, which she would take out each night before sleeping, setting them on the bedside table next to her phone. Without those devices, she was completely deaf. She couldn't hear voices, movement, or the sound of footsteps in the corridor just outside her room. Her weight was roughly 150 pounds. On the evening of January 31st, 2026, she used a ride-sharing service to go to her daughter Annie's house, just a few miles from her own, for a family dinner and games. Her arrival time was logged at approximately 5:32 p.m. The night was perfectly normal. They had dinner together at the table, played some games, and just talked the kind of typical Saturday evening a close-knit family shares when they all live in the same area and cherish their time together. Nancy arrived home just before 10 p.m., dropped off by an unknown individual. The whir of the garage door confirmed her arrival. Once it shut, she was sealed inside, seemingly secure, with all her daily necessities within arm's reach. Her pills were laid out on the kitchen counter. By her bed, her hearing aids and cell phone rested on the nightstand. Her world was precisely as she had left it hours before. But then, for 14 straight hours, a profound silence fell. No one reached out, not a single phone call, not one text message. No one made the short drive to confirm that the 84-year-old, who relied on a pacemaker and suffered from a heart condition, was all right and had taken her nightly medicine. The alarm wasn't raised out of a late-night sense of dread. No gut feeling or premonition prompted a call to the authorities. The chain of events began only when a church friend, noticing Nancy's absence from the virtual Sunday service, an event she never missed, contacted her daughter Annie at 11:56 a.m. On February 1st, Annie immediately got in her car and headed to her mother's home. A frantic search of the house and grounds revealed an unsettling scene. Nancy's phone, her hearing aids, her prescriptions, her keys, her wallet, and her car in the garage were all accounted for. Every single one of Nancy Guthrie's possessions was still inside the home. The only thing missing was Nancy herself. The family's panicked 911 call went out at 12:03 p.m. But by that point, the terrible event that had befallen Nancy Guthrie was already a nearly 10-hour-old mystery. The timeline that follows has been pieced together from official sources, including statements made by Sheriff Chris Nanos during press briefings, as well as corroboration by FBI personnel, public releases, and insiders who provided on-the-record accounts to major news outlets. The first critical event occurred at 1:47 a.m. on February 1st, 2026. At that moment, the Nest doorbell camera guarding Nancy Guthrie's front door was manually shut down. Sheriff Nanos verified this fact at his press conference on February 5th, where he stated that detectives were withholding the specific method used to disable the camera, but he did explicitly rule out a simple glitch or a dead battery. The message was unmistakable. An intruder had physically tampered with the device, blinding it, before making their move onto the property. Minutes later, at 2:12 a.m., the system's motion detectors triggered an alert, but with the camera already dead, no footage was recorded. Then, at 2:28 a.m., a crucial digital lifeline was severed. Nancy's pacemaker lost its connection to the iPhone on her bedside table. Investigators confirmed the phone itself was untouched, resting in its usual spot next to her hearing aids on the nightstand in her bedroom. Andrew McCabe, a former deputy director for the FBI and now a senior law enforcement analyst for CNN, explained the significance of this event in an interview with Brian Anton. He explained that when a pacemaker's Bluetooth signal to a monitoring device is lost, the most probable cause is that the two devices have been separated by a significant physical distance, as the connection has a finite range. Once the person with the implant travels beyond that radius, the link breaks. The chilling conclusion: Nancy was in transit. She was already far from her house by the time that signal vanished. 8 minutes later, at 2:36 a.m., a Ring camera owned by neighbors Elias and Danielle Strategulas, who resided approximately 2.5 miles from Nancy's home, captured a vehicle passing through their neighborhood. To verify the timing, NBC News correspondent Liz Kreutz personally drove the exact same route from Nancy's house to the Strategulas property. Her trip took precisely 6 minutes. Consider the timeline. The pacemaker disconnects at 2:28 a.m., followed by a 6-minute drive. The vehicle is then captured on video at 2:36 a.m., leaving a 2-minute gap, just enough time for someone to check their mirrors and adjust their grip on the wheel and take a steadying breath before venturing onto dark roads at 2:30 in the morning, with 150 pounds of human evidence concealed in the back. Crucially, that neighbor's camera was situated just beyond the official search perimeter. The Pima County Sheriff's Department had established their canvassing zone at a 2-mile distance from Nancy's residence. Because the Strategulas' home was located at 2.5 miles, they were never contacted by law enforcement. It was only after seeing news reports and recognizing the critical timestamp that they came forward with the footage themselves. When detectives finally entered the scene at 12:03 p.m., a full 11 hours after the camera had been disabled, they discovered bloodstains on the front porch, the door, and across the driveway. The Pima County Sheriff's Department later verified through DNA analysis that the blood was, in fact, a match for Nancy Guthrie. Former FBI Special Agent Maureen O'Connell, who has dedicated her career to crime scene analysis, offered a public assessment after reviewing photographs of the blood spatter. She noted that the drops fell vertically from a fixed position, with no empty spaces from someone walking through the pools, and no evidence of smearing. There were no drag marks. Her conclusion, delivered with certainty during an interview with Brian Anton, left no room for doubt. Nancy had been bundled in some kind of covering, most likely a blanket or a sheet, and was physically carried out of the house. The last time she passed through her own front door, she was not doing so under her own power. Over a 10-day period, a joint effort between the FBI and Google engineers managed to recover video from what FBI Director Kash Patel termed residual data, hidden deep within the Nest camera's back-end systems. This was an astonishing feat, considering the device was not subscribed to any cloud storage service. Any video not sent to the cloud typically vanishes if the camera is destroyed or disabled. It exists only on the device itself. And yet, technicians from Google managed to salvage what one official termed residual data. These were ghost-like video fragments that had pinged Google's servers during fleeting moments of connection, just before the camera was knocked offline for good. The recovery was a painstaking 10-day effort, but it yielded the chilling images broadcast on every news network in the nation. They showed a masked individual on Nancy Guthrie's porch, moving with a confidence that body language experts later defined as a clear display of ownership. There was zero hesitation, no nervous glances scanning the property. With head lowered, the figure moved with purpose directly toward the camera, behaving like someone who knew its precise location. He tapped the lens twice, as if to confirm it was still active, then concealed it using leaves ripped from a potted plant nearby. Based on that video, the FBI profiled the subject as a male, approximately 5'9" to 5'10" tall with a medium build, his face completely obscured. He wore dark attire, black nitrile gloves, and a 25-liter Ozark Trail backpack, a product sold exclusively through Walmart. A gun holster was secured to his right hip, and forensic specialists noted the faint outline of a possible tattoo on his right wrist. The mark was barely perceptible past the glove, and crucially, this finding was independently corroborated by sources at ABC News, CBS News, and CNN. Fox News also confirmed it. A separate image, showing the suspect without the backpack, was captured on a completely different day than the primary footage. It was evidence of a prior visit, a reconnaissance mission. He had been there before to survey the area, to assess the layout, and to ensure his plan was sound. He scoped it out, left, and then he returned. That earlier visit provides the essential framework for understanding the mystery of the security gate. If you examine pictures of Nancy Guthrie's front entrance, and countless examples from news crews are available online, one feature is prominently visible in every single report on the case. A formidable security gate is mounted directly in front of the main wooden door. This is not some decorative wrought iron piece or an artistic flourish. It is a heavy-duty security barrier made of solid iron or steel mesh. It's powder-coated to withstand the elements. Seated in a steel frame that is bolted deep into the door jamb and the house's structure. Such gates are a standard feature in homes across the Southwest, particularly in Arizona and Southern California. Houses constructed in the 1970s and 1980s were often designed with these gates as a core element of their security. Its design is brilliantly simple and effective. The gate swings outward on massive, heavy-duty hinges. When shut, it locks with a solid deadbolt that drives into a reinforced strike plate mounted within the doorframe. This allows residents to open the main wooden door for airflow through the mesh, while keeping out insects and animals, and, most importantly, unwanted intruders. People can get ventilation without sacrificing their safety. They can clearly see who is at their door and speak to them through the sturdy mesh without ever disengaging the barrier. The entire purpose of these gates is to make a forced entry so difficult that it would demand specialized tools and a lot of time, generating significant noise that would alert the neighborhood and leaving behind a trail of obvious evidence. A neighbor named Laura, who has lived in the Catalina Foothills for over a decade, spoke to NBC correspondent Brian Anton in an interview that aired on March 16th. Her own front door is equipped with the exact same kind of security gate. When she viewed the video of the masked man at Nancy's entrance, she instantly grasped a fact that would be lost on most people watching from other parts of the country. That man was not there to force his way through that door. As she put it, with the calm certainty of someone who intimately understands these systems, you don't just break into one of those gates. You are never getting through that security gate, she insisted. I happened to be speaking with a security expert about 2 or 3 weeks ago, and he confirmed it. You're not breaking into those gates. Laura wasn't offering an opinion. She was stating a physical certainty that every owner of such a gate knows. To get through one, you'd need powerful bolt cutters to sever the mesh, a massive pry bar to bend the steel frame itself, or enough time and brute force to rip the mounting bolts straight out of the wall. Any of those approaches would be incredibly loud. All of them would leave behind glaring, unmistakable damage. And each one would take time, not the 41 minutes he spent inside the home, but multiple minutes just to breach the gate itself, all while standing completely exposed on a front porch where a camera might be recording, and neighbors were just a shout away. The suspect in the video is not carrying tools. He has no bolt cutters. He is not holding a pry bar. In several shots, his gloved hands are visibly empty, save for the leaves he used to obscure the camera. Nothing about him suggests he arrived prepared to defeat a steel security barrier in the dead of night. And then there is what the investigators discovered when they arrived at Nancy's house 11 hours later. Investigators examined the security gate and found nothing. The frame wasn't bent, the mesh was intact, and there were zero signs of a forced entry. But Laura is convinced the suspect never breached that front door. Her theory, which she explained thoroughly in an interview with Brian Anton, is that he was simply waiting for an accomplice inside to let him in, and her perspective demands serious consideration. This isn't just guesswork from an outsider. It's an analysis rooted in local knowledge, coming from a resident of that very neighborhood. She understands the security systems common to those homes and has spent the last 44 days consumed by the question of how this could have happened to Nancy Guthrie. As Laura put it, I don't see him as the primary actor. To me, he looks like the lookout, the one posted outside, waiting for the others to emerge. Her logic is straightforward, because with that kind of security gate, a reinforced door like that, you simply can't force your way in. That's why she believes he was peering through, trying to get a sense of the situation inside. If you re-watch the video through that lens, his actions make more sense. The man isn't trying to break in. He doesn't pull on the handle or jiggle the lock. He's simply stationed there, head bowed, as if in anticipation. And that's when Laura spotted another crucial detail. Nancy's front entrance is flanked by glass panels on both sides. If the main wooden door behind that gate were open, a common practice on a warm night to let a breeze in, you could see right into the home, looking through both the gate's mesh and the sidelight windows. However, with the main door shut or the interior lights off, visibility would be practically zero. Laura theorizes the man was peering inside, attempting to gauge if his accomplice was prepared to act, trying to get confirmation that their plan was proceeding. She took it even further. I believe there may have been someone already in the house, getting ready to bring Nancy out, an inside man, and the man on the porch was his backup, waiting for that accomplice to unlock the door so he could help escort Nancy out of her own home. So let's walk through what this scenario would look like. First, an intruder gains entry to Nancy's home sometime before 1:47 a.m. This could have been accomplished in several ways. Perhaps they got in earlier in the evening, when Nancy was still up, by posing as someone familiar and non-threatening, a courier, a repairman, or even a neighbor. Anyone with a legitimate-sounding reason for knocking on her door. Nancy, described by everyone as warm and trusting after decades of living safely in the area, likely would have opened the door for someone who seemed harmless. The alternative? They already had a key. Consider a handyman, a regular service worker, or anyone Nancy might have entrusted with a key for emergencies or simple convenience. Any one of them could have walked right in whenever they chose. Or it could have been an unlocked door or window, a vulnerability known only to someone with intimate knowledge of her daily habits. But regardless of the method, the intruder was already inside the house when Nancy turned in for the night, likely around 10 or 10:30 p.m., given she arrived home at 9:50 p.m. And then, they waited. They could have laid in wait for hours, letting the house fall silent and ensuring the neighborhood was still. They waited until the risk of detection was at its absolute lowest. Then, at 1:47 a.m., they disabled the doorbell camera. This wasn't a crude act of vandalism. They didn't smash it or tear it from its mount. It was a precise move, executed to stop any further recording, a tactic that would have worked if not for Google's cloud-based data recovery. In the immediate moment, however, the camera went dead. Then, sometime between 1:47 a.m. and 2:28 a.m., a second person arrived on the porch. His arrival was no surprise to the person inside. Their timing had been coordinated. The accomplice opened the security gate. Then they opened the main wooden door, and the man from the porch stepped inside. What happened next is the most critical part of this theory. Working in tandem, the two of them transported Nancy from wherever she was in the house to the front entrance. She was likely wrapped in some kind of covering, a measure to stanch the bleeding from her injuries. And then they carried her outside. They placed her in a vehicle and vanished into the night, only to be spotted on a neighbor's Ring camera 2.5 miles away at 2:36 a.m. This is far from baseless speculation. It is a scenario meticulously pieced together from the known timeline and the hard physical evidence. Fact: the security gate was untouched. Fact: the main door showed no evidence of being forced. That 41-minute void between the camera being disabled and the pacemaker signal vanishing points to deliberate, unhurried activity within the home. It doesn't fit the profile of a lone, panicked burglar, rushing to overpower a victim, grab valuables, and flee before getting caught. Then there is the blood evidence. Droplets that fell vertically, with no signs of smearing or dragging. It's a pattern perfectly consistent with a person being carried carefully by two individuals who were consciously trying to minimize the forensic trail they left behind. Laura also raised a crucial point about the sheer physical difficulty of moving an elderly person, especially one who is either resisting or incapacitated. She had experience looking after her own mother at the end of her life, a woman who weighed 120 pounds, a full 30 pounds lighter than Nancy. And Laura recalled the immense difficulty of just getting her mother up a small flight of 3 or 4 steps. This was a struggle even when her mother was assisting, in broad daylight, with no urgency or need for silence. Now imagine a single person attempting to move Nancy Guthrie A woman weighing 150 pounds, with impaired movement, who could have been anything from a dead weight to actively fighting back, forcing her out of the home, navigating down the porch steps, crossing the entire driveway, and loading her into a car, all without losing their grip, and all without a single sound, leaving no scuff marks from being dragged or any trace of blood from the struggle. The feat would be almost impossible, but with two individuals acting in concert, the task suddenly seems achievable, and if one of those accomplices was positioned inside the home, ready to operate the security gate, then the video from the front door is no longer evidence of a break-in. It becomes a record of a coordinated, practiced plan being set in motion. The individual seen on the porch was not forcing his way inside. He was waiting for someone to let him in. 5 key pieces of evidence point to this theory. A conspiracy between an insider and an external partner. While each element is compelling on its own, when viewed as a whole, they reveal a pattern with few other plausible explanations. First, the scouting trip. 4 separate major news outlets received independent confirmation from sources, including ABC News, CBS News, CNN, and Fox News, that an image retrieved from the doorbell camera depicted the suspect without a backpack on a day completely separate from the night Nancy went missing, when he was filmed wearing one. The purpose of that initial visit was not the abduction itself, nor was it to neutralize the camera then and there. It was a scouting mission, a chance to approach the front door during the day or early evening, a time when he would not draw as much attention, allowing him to survey the property, locate the camera, and get a clear sense of the overall layout. It was his opportunity to verify the details he had received from an inside source. Because if the suspect was working with an accomplice, someone who could detail the security gate's function, the camera's exact position, Nancy's daily habits, and the optimal moment to strike, that scouting trip remains a logical step. There is no substitute for seeing a location with your own eyes. Actually standing at that door, getting a first-hand look at the security gate, and figuring out precisely how it operates and the exact spot an insider would need to be to open it, that is intel you simply cannot acquire from a description alone. This preliminary visit proves the suspect was not opportunistic. He was methodical, and if he was coordinating with an insider, this trip served as the final check before putting the plan into action. The second point. The camera was neutralized externally, but the method used suggests crucial internal information. At 1:47 a.m., the doorbell camera stopped transmitting. It took a 10-day joint effort by the FBI and Google to retrieve footage from server backups, a feat made necessary because the perpetrator thought he had wiped it for good. He failed. Engineers managed to salvage residual data packets that had already reached Google's servers just before the unit was completely shut down. Still, the attempt itself points to a high level of planning. Nancy's Nest camera was not subscribed to a cloud storage service. This critical piece of information is impossible to know just by looking at the device, which is affixed to the doorframe. It appears identical to any other Nest doorbell, and there is certainly no notice posted on the house indicating a lack of cloud backup. Only someone with intimate knowledge of the setup would be aware of that fact. Someone who had been in the house and seen how the system operated, an individual who believed that by destroying the camera on site, they could prevent any local recording, even if some data had already been saved remotely. If the perpetrator did have an accomplice on the inside, that person could have passed along this detail. This would have led the suspect to believe mistakenly, but logically, based on the intel he received, that shutting down the camera at 1:47 a.m. would erase any visual record of his subsequent actions. Third, the complete lack of forced entry. Authorities have found no signs of damage to the security gate, nor have they reported any harm to the main wooden door. No shattered windows, no telltale pry marks, none of the classic indicators of a break-in. Had the intruder used brute force, he would have left a trail. We would expect to see marks on the gate's frame from a crowbar, severed mesh from bolt cutters, splintered wood from a kicked-in door, or shards of glass from a broken pane. The fact that none of this damage exists points to only three possibilities for how entry was made. First, with a key. Second, with help from someone already inside, who simply opened the door. Or third, through an unlocked door or window, left open either by Nancy or by another person who had been in the home previously. Let us consider the key scenario. How would an intruder get a key? Nancy was not known to hand out keys to just anyone, but she may have entrusted one to a repair person, a trusted neighbor, or others who needed legitimate access to her house. The scenario of someone opening the door from within obviously points to an accomplice, and even an unlocked entry point suggests inside knowledge of Nancy's habits and security routines. They knew her habits, which doors she secured, and which she might occasionally forget. They even knew when she would retire for the night, the moment the house fell silent. Every one of these theories leads to a chilling conclusion. The person responsible had been in her home before. Consider the fourth point, the timeline. It's a 41-minute window, stretching from 1:47 a.m., when the camera went dark, to 2:28 a.m., the moment her pacemaker signal vanished. Now, imagine a single perpetrator trying to accomplish everything in that specific time frame. He would have to breach the home, navigate a strange layout in complete darkness without a sound, and locate NY's bedroom. Then, he'd have to overpower an 84-year-old woman, someone who could awaken, cry for help, or fight back. If theft was a goal, he'd need to scour the house for valuables. After that, he'd have to find a covering for her, then haul her from the bedroom, all the way through the residence to the main entrance. The ordeal would continue, maneuvering her outside, down the porch, over the driveway, and finally into a car before making an escape. 41 minutes is an eternity to linger at the scene of a violent abduction. Each passing second magnifies the danger. There's the risk of Nancy screaming upon waking, the risk of a neighbor being alerted by a strange noise. A passing car might spot his vehicle. He could fumble and drop something, leaving behind a crucial piece of evidence, the very mistake that could lead back to him. Typically, perpetrators aim for a swift entry and exit. The 41-minute duration hints at an entirely different scenario. But what if it wasn't one person? If two individuals collaborated, one positioned inside beforehand, the other coming in after the camera was cut, then 41 minutes transforms into a period of careful, coordinated action. It's enough time to ensure Nancy is restrained without causing new injuries that might leave more blood evidence, and to bundle her securely to contain any bleeding. It's time to transport her without losing their grip, and to load her into the vehicle undetected. It provides a chance to wipe away any potential smudges, even if wearing gloves, and to take one final, careful look to confirm no traces were left behind. A pair operating in tandem can afford to be methodical. A lone intruder would be in a desperate hurry. The fifth element to consider is the blood evidence and the pure physics of moving a human body. Maureen Unell, a former FBI special agent with decades of crime scene analysis experience, examined photos of the bloodstains on NY's porch, offering a description in sharp, forensic detail. She noted droplets that had fallen vertically from a static position. There were no empty spaces from footprints, no smears, and absolutely no signs of dragging. This pattern strongly suggests the victim was carried. However, moving a 150-pound individual, bundled up and potentially unconscious or struggling, is a formidable task. Laura, having been a caregiver for her own elderly mother, knew this firsthand. She recounted the difficulty of helping her mother up the stairs, even when her mother weighed less and was actively trying to help. Nancy was a heavier woman. Even when compliant, Nancy's mobility was restricted. Transporting her while she was unconscious or fighting back would demand significant strength and teamwork. For a single individual to carry Nancy from within the home, out the front entrance, down the porch steps clearly seen in pictures of the home, and into a car would be extraordinarily challenging. It's not beyond the realm of possibility, but it's incredibly hard. And with difficulty comes risk. The risk of dropping her, leaving more blood, or creating a disturbance. But for two people acting as a team, the job becomes far more feasible. One person could take her shoulders, the other her legs. They could move in sync, each able to watch their footing, and both could compensate if she moved or her weight shifted unexpectedly. While the blood spatter alone doesn't prove two attackers, it aligns perfectly with that theory. And when you factor in the security gate, the timeline, and the absence of a forced entry, plus the intimate knowledge needed to neutralize the camera system, the idea of two collaborators stops feeling like a guess and begins to look like the only explanation that fits all the facts. Then, the FBI posed a question to Laura that revealed a detail previously unknown to the public. They asked, "Do you have any security footage from January 24th, 2026? This was a date that had never been publicly linked to the investigation. It's a date that law enforcement is now scrutinizing with the same laser focus they once applied to January 11th. Laura revealed to Brian Anton that on Friday, March 14th, just 2 days before her interview was broadcast, FBI agents came to her house. They specifically requested to see her security recordings from that particular day. They stayed with her, assisting as she combed through the footage. Clearly, they were searching for something specific. January 24th falls 8 days prior to Nancy's disappearance. It was a Saturday. January 11th, the date authorities had already highlighted while questioning neighbors, was also a Saturday. February 1st, the day of Nancy's abduction, was also a Saturday. This creates a pattern. 3 Saturdays, 3 dates authorities now suspect are linked. If the perpetrator was an individual with a standard work week, someone whose job prevented them from conducting surveillance or scouting the area during the day, then Saturday presented the perfect opportunity to visit the Catalina Foothills without raising suspicion and without needing an alibi for being absent from their job. All without tipping off an employer or coworkers who might later recall he was gone, unfocused, or asking weird questions. Investigators are piecing together a chilling pattern. The suspect first arrived in the neighborhood on January 11th. This may have been the day he was recorded on his initial surveillance run, the one where he had no backpack. He went straight to NY's door. He stared into the camera. He evaluated the security gate. He was confirming the intel provided by an inside source. He returned on January 24th. What he did during that visit remains unknown. Laura's cameras only captured wildlife passing through her property. Nothing suspicious. But that doesn't mean other neighbors have no footage. Other cameras could have recorded a car, an individual, or some activity that seemed perfectly normal at the time, but with the knowledge of what happened just a week later, it takes on a sinister new significance. And then he returned on February 1st, this time with the backpack, the gloves, and the entire plan in motion. 3 trips, all on Saturdays, gave him 3 chances to perfect his strategy, to nail down the timing, and to be certain the target was exposed. This was not a random act of opportunity. This was not some person who happened to be driving through the area, saw an open garage, and decided to act on a whim. This was methodical. This was calculated. This points to someone who poured weeks, if not longer, into preparing for the night of February 1st. And when a person invests that kind of time, it's because they were convinced the target was worth the effort, because they were told the plan was solid, because an insider had supplied enough information to make the risk acceptable. But there's more. Another detail from Laura's interview is demanding scrutiny because it hints at the suspect's surprising level of technical skill. The FBI asked Laura if her internet had gone out on the evening of February 1st. That isn't a question investigators throw out lightly. It's a question they pose when they suspect someone deliberately knocked out connectivity in the area as part of their tactical approach. If the suspect, or an accomplice on the inside, killed the internet service to the area before 1:47 a.m., it would answer several questions that have stumped investigators and the public from the very beginning. It explains why NY's cell phone, which sat on the nightstand beside her hearing aids, failed to broadcast any trackable location data after she was abducted. Modern smartphones are in constant contact with cell towers and Wi-Fi, updating their location in real time. If NY's phone was using her home Wi-Fi and that network was cut at the exact same time, cellular signals were jammed or otherwise blocked, the phone's last registered location would be her house, and then it would simply vanish from the network. No pings, no location updates, no digital breadcrumbs for law enforcement to track. It would also explain why security cameras on neighboring properties failed to record any useful video of cars entering or leaving during that critical window. Many home security systems, especially the type you see in the Catalina Foothills, require an active internet connection to upload video to cloud-based storage. If the internet was out of service as the suspect moved through the area, the cameras would save recordings locally to SD cards or internal memory, but they wouldn't be able to transmit anything. And if the suspect avoided passing directly in front of those cameras, or if they were aimed to watch driveways instead of the street, there would be nothing to see. This theory would also account for why the Nest doorbell camera at NY's home never uploaded its footage to Google's cloud in real time. FBI agents and Google engineers spent 10 days painstakingly recovering residual data from back-end systems, all because the camera was disconnected from the cloud during that crucial period. If the internet service was dead, the camera was incapable of transmitting. This would suggest a degree of technical expertise that drastically narrows down the pool of suspects. Knocking out internet to a residential block can be accomplished a few different ways. The most direct route is to physically sever the fiber optic or cable lines that bring service into the homes there. These lines are often accessible inside utility boxes, at junction points, and in other above-ground fixtures. Someone with even a basic familiarity with telecommunications systems could find the right junction box, force it open, and cut the lines with bolt cutters. The blackout would be instantaneous. Service would fail for every single home on that circuit, and unless a resident reported the outage to their service provider, which is highly improbable in the middle of the night, it likely wouldn't get fixed until regular business hours the following day. The second option is signal jamming. While portable Wi-Fi and cellular jamming devices are illegal in the United States, they're readily available for purchase online from international suppliers. A signal jammer with enough power to black out an entire residential zone, the size of the Catalina Foothills neighborhood, could easily be concealed in a backpack, and the individual captured in the doorbell footage is carrying a backpack. If that bag was housing a signal jammer rather than burglary tools or personal items, it offers a chilling explanation for why he wore it to the door and kept it with him for the entire event. Either of these methods requires significant forethought. Both demand a specific level of technical expertise. Both require the awareness that internet and cellular signals are weak points, vulnerabilities that can be strategically targeted. Your average criminal does not consider cutting off internet access. Most offenders lack a sophisticated understanding of telecommunications systems and wouldn't know which cables to sever or what frequencies to block. The vast majority of criminals operate in a world of brute force, prying locks, smashing windows, and overpowering their targets without a second thought for the electronic footprint they're creating. This individual, or the person directing him, grasped the importance of the digital dimension. And that kind of insight points toward either professional training, a background in telecommunications or information technology, or guidance from someone who possesses that very expertise. Laura mentioned she never noticed her internet failing that night. She was sound asleep. She wouldn't have known anything was amiss unless she happened to wake up, try to use her phone, and see that the Wi-Fi was down. And even in that scenario, she might have just dismissed it as a momentary outage and gone back to bed. But she also revealed that she changed her internet service provider just 2 weeks after Nancy went missing. This means she can no longer retrieve the service records from early February that could potentially confirm an outage. However, other residents in the area might still possess that data, and the fact that the FBI is asking about it could mean they already have proof from other places, like the internet company itself, from neighbors who happen to save their own logs, or from smart devices that automatically registered a connectivity failure during that exact window of time. If the internet connection was intentionally disabled, it stands as one more piece of compelling evidence that points to a planned, coordinated strike involving someone with insider information and someone with technical skills working in tandem. If the theory of an inside informant collaborating with an outside operative holds true, it completely alters the focus of the entire investigation. It means authorities are no longer just searching for the masked man on the video. They are hunting for a team of two people, one who had intimate access to Nancy's home and another who carried out the physical abduction. It could even involve a third person. If the insider and the technical specialist who knew how to cripple the internet service are not one and the same, the groups of people who had access to Nancy's home are specific and can be investigated. Family members have been formally exonerated. On February 16th, Sheriff Chris Nano announced publicly that the Guthrie family, which includes all siblings and their spouses, has been ruled out as potential suspects in this case. He described any insinuation of family involvement as both cruel and wrong. That exoneration is final. It is not contested. It is not unclear. But there are other avenues of access that investigators are almost certainly exploring. Service professionals who performed work at the property in recent months or even years. People who were hired to clean the house. Individuals who handled the yard work, the pool maintenance, and the landscaping. Any contractors who were brought in for repairs, system installations, or renovations to the home. Delivery personnel with established routes who may have interacted with Nancy often enough to become familiar with her schedule. Uber or Lyft drivers who might have seen inside the residence when picking her up or dropping her off. Home caregivers. If Nancy utilized any such services, which is plausible given her reported mobility issues. Also, neighbors who had been inside for visits or who were entrusted with a key for emergencies. Every single one of these categories is an avenue for investigation. Service records can be acquired via subpoena. Employment histories can be examined. Background checks can be conducted. Cell phone data can be used to pinpoint whose phones were in the vicinity on January 11th, January 24th, and February 1st. Former FBI Special Agent Jennifer Coffender, who has emerged as one of the leading public voices analyzing this investigation, has consistently stated that her primary theory is that individuals with a peripheral link to the household inadvertently passed on insider knowledge to criminals. She has been very direct about her meaning, stating in interviews with Newsweek and the Daily Mail that this means it was either family, and she has conceded the family has been cleared, or, she continued, it could be someone Nancy employed, like the pool technician or a housekeeper, someone responsible for maintenance, but in any case, a person who was close to her. Coffender does not think the person who provided this information necessarily wanted any harm to befall Nancy. She has put forward the idea that during the normal course of their duties, by asking simple questions and engaging in casual conversation with an elderly woman who was reportedly very warm and trusting, someone could have unwittingly assembled a profile of Nancy's vulnerability, never suspecting how that knowledge would be exploited. A remark could have been made to anyone, a friend, a relative, an associate, mentioning work at a house in the Catalina Foothills, where an older woman, wealthy and with limited mobility, was living by herself. Information like her daughter's fame, or that the home was $1 million property, could have been part of the conversation, or even that she turned in for the night early, taking out her hearing aids and becoming completely cut off from any sound. Those kinds of details, shared innocently, could have reached someone who recognized an opening, a person who then started digging for more, a person who began to plot. But if the theory about the security gate is right, if getting past it meant you either had keys or someone let you in from the inside, then the accomplice was much more than just a source of loose talk. This person had to be prepared to get physically involved, to be at the house that night, to open the security gate and help abduct Nancy. That shrinks the list of potential suspects dramatically. This rules out anyone who might have been careless with information, but would draw the line at actual violence. It points to a person with a deeper motivation than simply passing along a tip. It could be for money, a personal grudge, or pressure from an outside accomplice. Whatever the reason, it pushed them to escalate from being an information source to a hands-on participant. That is the person investigators are hunting for. And the clues, the security gate, the absence of a break-in, the tight timeline, the insider's awareness of the camera setup, and the possible interruption of internet service are all guiding them down a very specific path. On March 13th, 3 days before Laura's interview went public, Sheriff Chris Nanos spoke with NBC News, and one particular exchange has unsettled the community and sparked new speculation about what investigators know. When the reporter asked, "Do you think this person could strike again?" Nanos's answer was chilling. Absolutely. He had never said anything like that publicly before. During previous press conferences and media appearances, his message was that the family wasn't involved, that detectives were actively chasing leads, and that there was still hope Nancy was alive. But the question of whether Nancy's abductor posed a threat to others had never been so directly answered. Now, it has. And his response was unambiguous. Absolutely. Yet, he immediately followed it with a statement that seems to cloud that very certainty. He added, "We believe it was targeted, but we're not really sure. Targeted, but not sure." It's a deeply ambiguous comment, the kind that creates far more questions than it resolves. Laura heard that statement, and after 44 days of agonizing over what happened to her neighbor just 4 houses down, she voiced the question on everyone's mind. What does targeted even mean? Targeted how? She started running through the scenarios. Was Nancy a target because she was affluent? Or because her daughter was a public figure? Or simply because she was living alone? Was it because she was elderly and defenseless? Or did someone know the intimate layout of her home and see a clear path? Or was it something deeply personal about Nancy herself that remains hidden from us? If the perpetrator was targeting based on traits common to many in the Catalina Foothills, wealth, solitude, old age, a large house shielded from neighbors' view, then, without a doubt, the person responsible could do this again. Anyone fitting that description could be in danger. However, if the targeting was aimed specifically at Nancy Guthrie, based on intimate knowledge of her life, her habits, and her family, her unique vulnerabilities, then the threat to the wider community might be significantly less. The sheriff's comment implies that investigators are convinced it was a targeted act, but they can't yet nail down the specific criteria used. They are unsure if this was an opportunistic crime preying on general vulnerability or a deliberate plot founded on specific, inside information about Nancy. And it's that void of certainty that has residents all over the Catalina Foothills reassessing their own safety, installing new cameras, and reinforcing their locks. People are now scrutinizing service providers who show up at their homes, demanding to see identification, and confirming company credentials before allowing anyone onto their property. Laura admitted she has fortified her own security since Nancy was taken. She declined to detail the exact measures she's taken, which is a smart move, since explaining your security publicly renders it useless. But she did confirm that Nancy's disappearance has fundamentally altered how she views who she allows near her home and how she keeps track of that access. Her neighbors have followed suit. Some are putting in more cameras. Others are changing out all their locks. Still, others are organizing neighborhood watch programs or creating informal networks to keep a closer eye on one another. The sheriff's warning was stark. This person could strike again. It unleashed a wave of apprehension and a new watchfulness. But whether this fear is truly warranted depends on secrets known only to investigators. For 44 days, Nancy Guthrie has been gone without a trace. A joint task force, pairing the FBI with the Pima County Sheriff's Department, is deploying a massive amount of resources to the case. Over 400 law enforcement personnel have contributed at various points, with approximately 100 FBI agents dedicated solely to this investigation, alongside elite units like the Bureau's Cellular Analysis Survey Team, experts in investigative genetic genealogy, and specialists in digital forensics. That same genetic technology finally unmasked the Golden State Killer after 4 decades of his crimes remaining a mystery, and it pointed to Brian Kauberger and the Idaho student murders within weeks. Now it is being used on DNA recovered from Nancy's property. This method's power lies in its ability to work, even if the suspect has no criminal history. It doesn't matter if they are absent from every law enforcement database. The only thing required is a single distant relative, maybe a second cousin, or even a third, someone linked by blood, who once sent their DNA to a consumer service, like 23andMe or Ancestry.com, and is listed in a public genealogy database. A single partial match can unlock a whole family tree, which, when traced forward through generations and checked against other records, can lead directly to a name. The FBI's Cellular Analysis Survey team is charting the presence of mobile devices across a series of critical dates: February 1st, January 24th, January 11th, and likely other dates investigators are keeping secret. They are searching for a pattern. They're hunting for a phone that appeared in the Catalina Foothills on more than one Saturday, a device that might have been used for reconnaissance. They're hunting for the phone that was there on the night Nancy was abducted. They need the phone whose location history, when cross-referenced with cell tower data and carrier information, puts it in very specific places, at the exact times that match the crime's timeline. Should that analysis pinpoint a phone belonging to an individual tied to any of the theories circulating among experts, someone who performed work on Nancy's property, someone who had access to the inside of her house, or an individual with the technical skill to disable her internet, then this investigation is much further along than anyone outside the task force realizes. The router from Nancy's house is undergoing analysis for digital signatures referred to as probe requests. These are the constant, automatic signals our smartphones transmit as they search for known Wi-Fi networks. Every phone in existence does this around the clock. Any device that passed within range of Nancy's router on the night of February 1st might have left a digital fingerprint that can be isolated and examined. While DNA processing involves complex lab work, digital forensics can deliver answers in just hours or days. The FBI has Nancy's router. If it holds a probe request from a phone that had no reason to be in her home that evening, they are going to find it. The Walmart backpack, seen in the doorbell video, is being methodically tracked through sales data. Walmart operates with exceptionally advanced inventory management systems. It's possible to identify every single store that took delivery of that specific 25-liter Ozark Trail backpack in the months prior to February 1st. Every sale of that backpack can be extracted from their records. If the buyer used a credit or debit card instead of cash, a name is connected to that purchase. Law enforcement experts have analyzed the gun holster on the suspect's hip, identifying it as a revolver holster made by the brand Strategy. Authorities are now poring over recent transaction records from gun shops in the Tucson area. The FBI has already entered at least one gun store showing somewhere between 18 to 24 photographs and names, inquiring if any had purchased a firearm in the last year. That particular shop reported no hits. But the search is not over. There are many other stores, other suppliers, and countless more records to examine. Billboards displaying Nancy's picture and the $1.2 million reward information have been erected in several states, extending far beyond Arizona. Tips on possible sightings have come in from Texas, Southern California, Nevada, and other parts of the country. The FBI is pursuing this as a case with a national scope because they simply don't know where Nancy was taken or where she is currently being held. The process is working. The science is being applied. The evidence is being analyzed. And if the theory about the security gate holds true, they are simultaneously creating a profile of a person who had access to Nancy Guthrie's home before she disappeared. Nancy Guthrie had called her house in the Catalina Foothills home for 50 years. It's where she raised 3 children by herself after her husband died. She knew all her neighbors. She was at church every Sunday. She had woven her life into a community where trust was the default, where people helped one another, a place where a knock on the door at supper time meant you opened it without a second thought, because that was the way of things in a neighborhood like hers. And somebody exploited that very trust to get inside her home. That security gate on her front porch was always there, hiding in plain sight in every photograph and all the doorbell camera footage. It was still there when the crime scene investigators arrived. It's been a constant, visible detail in the media coverage since February 1st. Yet, it wasn't until Laura clarified its function to Brian Anton that its true meaning became clear. She explained the gate's resilience, how it was designed to resist force, and how breaching it would have required tools, created a racket, and taken time. Until that moment, the larger significance of that gate remained an internal detail of the investigation. Now, the picture is different. The man on that porch wasn't forcing his way in. He was waiting for entry. Someone on the inside of Nancy Guthrie's home unlocked that formidable gate and allowed him to enter, and that accomplice is still unidentified. The FBI is now hunting for this person. The trail of evidence leads directly to them. A $1.2 million reward is on the table for the tip that finally puts a name to this individual and leads to Nancy's safe return. 44 days have passed, with no arrests, no formal charges, and no closure. But that security gate confirms a fact that detectives have operated on from day one, a fact they are now pursuing with every resource they have. Nancy Guthrie was not taken from her house by a stranger acting alone. Someone assisted in her abduction, an individual who either possessed a key, was granted access, or was trusted enough to be welcomed inside. The net is tightening. Physical evidence is immutable. The sequence of events is locked in. DNA analysis is underway. Cell phone tower records are being meticulously mapped. Digital trails are being followed. And the answer is buried somewhere in the details. It's in the space between the doorbell video, the bloodstains on the porch, and the security gate that was opened, not broken. And it's within the 41 minutes that ticked by from the moment the camera went dead to the instant her pacemaker stopped transmitting. A name is in there. If you hold any information regarding Nancy Guthrie's disappearance, please reach out to the FBI at 1-800-CALL-FBI. The total reward stands at $1.2 million. That includes $1 million from the Guthrie family, $100,000 from the FBI, and other contributions from various sources. If you were employed on Nancy's property, made deliveries to her residence, or offered any services within the Catalina Foothills area, your information could be vital. If you recall anything out of the ordinary during the weekends of January 11th, January 24th, or February 1st, that detail is important. No matter how minor it might have seemed then, no matter if you question its relevance now, please contact the authorities. If you know of anyone who worked in that vicinity and ever mentioned a wealthy older woman who lived by herself, or who showed an unusual interest in that specific area for reasons that seemed odd at the time, make the call. If you are a retailer who sold a 25-liter Ozark Trail backpack in the greater Tucson area during December of 2025 or January of 2026, and any part of that sale felt strange, you need to report it. Every single piece of information matters. Each call is taken seriously. Every lead is investigated. For ongoing updates on this investigation, and other cases where the evidence is building and the pursuit of justice is active, subscribe to Crime Uncovered. Make sure to enable notifications. We will report every confirmed step forward in this case, citing all documented sources. Leave a comment below. Were you aware of the security gate's importance before this report? This single detail completely reframes our understanding of what transpired that evening. Nancy Guthrie must be found. Her loved ones are desperate for the truth, and the individual who unlatched that gate, inviting a masked figure into her house, holds the key to what truly happened. Nancy Guthrie lived 84 years, building a life rooted in community, faith, and the quiet certainty that her neighbors were good people. She never imagined that trust, the very force that held her world together, could be used as a weapon against her. The gate was not broken. It was opened from the inside. Her story teaches us something profound and painful. Vulnerability is not weakness, but it does require protection. Elderly individuals living alone carry an invisible weight of risk. They depend on daily routines, on trusted faces, on the assumption that familiarity equals safety. Predators know this. They study it. They exploit it not with force, but with access, patience, and the willingness of someone on the inside to open a door that should never have been opened.